Thank you so much, Caitlin. I'm not going to defend myself against the accusations of being sweary, because it's true. So, last year I read a piece, a Substack piece entitled "People Who Demand Nothing of You," or Notes on Charismatic People. And it was written by someone who, as far as I know, has no particular or spiritual or religious outlook, and it was sent to me by an atheist friend. And I'm going to quote you a chunk of it. "The most likable, charismatic, enjoyable people to be around are people who demand nothing of you." At first I'd written, "ask nothing of you," but that didn't feel quite right. It felt too detached, like they wanted nothing from others, like they never invited you to things or asked for commitment, and that's not true of the people I'm thinking of. The most charismatic people I know, who seem to have this radiant, magnetic quality to their presence, are those that actually invite you to loads of things, but are totally okay with you declining, and they really mean it. They don't need anything from you. And this leads you to trust their invitation to engage. Because after all, who is more selfless than someone who appears complete? And despite this, they are being fully mentally and emotionally present with you, making you feel loved and seen and worthy. Interacting with highly charismatic people gives you a high because of the intensity of being seen. And it's rare to encounter people who can really see you, because most people have too much going on in their heads. The difference is in whether they encounter you as an equal or as a means to some other end, and this part never lies. See how they leave you feeling, especially over time. Interactions with them come with the least number of strings attached. It feels like they are just having fun, lightly playing with possibilities. They're not holding love hostage when you don't act in accordance with their desires. They approach your presence with gratitude, but don't demand you stay forever. There is no hint of scarcity. They live in the realm of what is possible and abundant, and they are not afraid of what happens. Because no matter what happens, they know it will be fundamentally okay. And I've noticed that they don't leave what feels like a sticky trace after they're gone. And I remember them vividly, and I'm more touched by them, but it lacks that feeling of molasses. I get sticky traces when I interact with people who guilt me, are passive-aggressive, pedestalize me. I think you can hear that. It's about people who either are looking up to us or looking down at us, can both leave these sticky traces. Ask things of me I don't believe are what they truly want, and if I give it to them anyway, it's like feeding a hungry ghost. Every interaction with them feels like they are saying, "Please love me," or "Make me feel okay," or "I need you." To be a truly charismatic person, you have to actually like people. And be present. Set down whatever stands between you and vibrant, pulsing reality. It's a lot more like practicing how to freefall than learning how to act in a movie. Well, this post really stayed with me, just because it's a great piece of writing. It's kind of true observations about how it can feel being in the world. And it planted this seed of a kind of painfully sweet longing to be becoming this kind of person. And originally I felt a bit guilty about that. I was like, "Lord, why am I so desperate to be this kind of amazing person that this piece is writing about?" But the more I sat with it, I begin to see how clearly that in theory, Christians should be amongst the most benevolently charismatic people in the world. If the claims of my faith are true, and I am truly living as if they were true, I actually don't need other people to fill some hole in me. I'm already enough. I can live in a posture of that enoughness, which is the opposite of scarcity, with wide open arms of hospitality. I can invite people in and be delighted when they come and hold it so lightly when they don't. And even more radically, and this is the claim, I am not saying I know exactly how to live this, I might be able to be becoming someone who is fundamentally unafraid, who trusts not that everything will be okay, because unfortunately that is not the promise, but that love is stronger than death. And so everything will be okay in the end. And so growing closer to being this kind of charismatic person has become a bit of a goal of mine, partly because, if I ever need to change course and become an uber villain, which you just got to keep your options open in this world, being able to present in this way is super useful. That's in me too, I'll be honest. But I hope most days, more honestly, because I'm coming to the conclusion that I think this might be a little bit what it looks like to be growing in the fruit of the Spirit. And I love the fruit of the Spirit. But when I rebrand it in my head as becoming a truly charismatic person, it's much more motivating. And there's loads we could drill down into today. There's loads of directions we could take this. What does it mean to live hospitably with wide open doors and hearts and arms? We could get to the real pain point about being people who do not live in fear, given that the Bible is pretty clear that the emotion of fear comes with some soul danger in a way that grief and rage don't always. And this one is tricky for me because anxiety is my particular temptation. And I've actually been talking about that theme a lot over the last 2 weeks while I've been in the US. And if we have some time in the Q&A, we can talk about it then maybe. But for now, I'm going to major on the idea that charismatic people don't demand anything of others. That we can want them, but not need them in that way that lives sticky traces. Because truly charismatic people have a stable sense of self. They neither look down on, nor really look up to other people, but look them in the eye as equals. And I wrote about this in Fully Alive, which I'm really grateful for Caitlin's introduction to, because I still find it hard to describe a year after it came out. But it's a set of personal essays which are about many things, loosely structured around the 7 deadly sins, and how we might be becoming the kind of people the world needs in these times. And in my chapter on envy, I unpacked what I think envy is really rooted in, which is status anxiety and an unstable sense of self. And envy is definitely the least cool of the 7 deadly sins. You've noticed this? It's maybe why I don't get asked to talk about it a lot. I forced it into this one. Because lust is sexy, let's be honest. Greed might make you rich. Gluttony is personified in my head as that hedonistic friend you really want at a party. Acedia is really chill. I'm not chill. I am earnest and intense, and therefore will never really be cool. Pride, love yourself, self-love. It's the defining social virtue of our culture. And wrath, especially right now, when we are directing it at the wrong people, the other guys, is a really quick route to a claim from our own tribe. But envy and the cluster of emotions, status anxiety, shame, insecurity, they all boil down to this most tender thing, a deep-seated sense of not enoughness. They're a small psychic septic wound, an embarrassing and painful secret, the verruca of temptations. But it's unsurprising that we feel some of this. I've just come from Washington, D.C. and Princeton, where status anxiety, status awareness was pretty evident. You guys don't struggle with this here in New York, right? I can just tell already. Actually, I think this group is very unusual, possibly, in this city today. Because without a transcendent frame for human value, basically a religiously or at least philosophically rooted anthropology, inequality, human inequality, seems obvious and intuitive. This is not something we can necessarily come to purely observationally. When you have that, a loss of a transcendent frame, and a supposedly meritocratic, socially mobile society, what excuse might I have for not crushing it? If you weren't in Lindsay's beautiful breakout this morning about shame and insecurity, I would recommend getting hold of it if you can, because she really put her finger on this ability of our culture to impose on us an endemic sense of not enoughness. And it drives this obsession with self-improvement and goals. And though we rarely say the quiet part aloud, it's at least partly because, honestly, it feels good to be better than other people. Right? It's not just me. Tell me it's not just me. Come on, guys. No one wants to be overlooked. If the choice, as it seems to be, is to be looked down on or looked up to, sure as hell we want to be looked up to. And this desire to avoid being overlooked comes from such a deep place, because everyone is in search of a gaze. In the earliest moments of a human life, a baby is searching for one thing: 2 eyes turned towards it. As writer Andy Crouch puts it, recognition is the first human quest. We might like to think we define ourselves, love ourselves, create ourselves. But from our very first moments, we are inescapably social creatures looking outside of ourselves to find our value. And this is a deeply good thing, because it drives us outward into the loving relationships we need to thrive, but it's also our Achilles heel. Because when our need for deep, unconditional attention and affirmation goes unmet, as it frankly almost always partly will in those early years, no matter how good our parenting, we look to wider society to sate that hunger. And the world meets us, often with what Virginia Woolf calls its notorious indifference. William James wrote in 1890 that no more fiendish punishment could be devised, that one should be turned loose in society and remain absolutely unnoticed by all members thereof. And this search for recognition becomes a search for attention, and then a search for status, and all we are shown is status in comparison. Figuring it out, triangulating ourselves. Where do we sit in this hierarchy? And this is so part of how humans show up. I was just with my brother, he has a dog, and he was like, oh, it's how dogs work too. Like, when they are sniffing bottoms, they are trying to figure out where they sit in the pack hierarchy. And when they can figure out when they sit in the pack hierarchy, they can relax. Most of the time, it's just below the level of our consciousness. But noticing it feels like part of breaking the spell. I'm feeling a bit like I'm going to make you slightly bum clenchy now, but just bear with me. Think back to when you arrived at this conference. Like, if you were with a big group of friends that you felt really safe with, this might have been less the case. But particularly if you arrived on your own or just with one other person, maybe you hadn't been before, you weren't quite sure what you were coming into. 2 things I am going to posit were probably going on with you. One was what scientists call homophily, and I like to call people like me syndrome, which just means the deep-seated human preference for people like ourselves. And this is just one of the most solid findings in social psychology. It is seemingly a constant across cultures. It's been around for a long time. We adorably ridiculous, pathetic humans are constantly scanning the world for fragments of our own reflection. And we can immediately hear the ways in which people like me syndrome can lead to some really bad places, right? Around skin color, or around gender, or a range of other things that we rightly have been thinking a bit more about lately. But it holds for like seemingly even more, or the things that we think of as entirely arbitrary. Actually, those things are, possibly arbitrary as well. Things like, if you are a door-to-door salesperson, you are more likely to make a sale if the person that you're trying to sell to shares one physical characteristic with you. And it could be their height, or their hair color, or their eye color. You might find it when you meet someone. I notice it if I meet someone who has the same glasses as me. I'm like, oh, they seem like such a good person. Same brand of notebook. Like, watch yourself as you meet people today. Same music. Like, in some ways, this is really obvious, but also it's not obvious because why? Why does someone having the same taste in notebooks to me make me feel safer? It's homophily. And the other thing that's going on is status awareness, this human equivalent of bottom sniffing. Who in the room is high status? Who is low status? And how do I fit here? And it's not just the obvious stuff. Like, I don't need to tell you that this goes on in society around money and job titles and hotness, but it really depends on the community that you're in and the values that that community in theory espouses. So in kind of intellectual groupings, it's not going to be about how much you earn. It's going to be about your ability to quote obscure books or be scathing around the right people. In this gathering, it might be someone who can quote Luther in the original German. I don't know. Might be the funniest or the most stylish. Like, what we ascribe status to might change, but we are always doing it. And I don't know if any of you played this game in school drama classes, but in my drama classes, we played an improvisation game where we were handed out cards with a number on them. And we were told to interact with each other depending on how low or high we were on the status scale. And we were 14. They did not need to say anything else. We did not need the sociological unpacking. We might not have known the language, but we knew this in our bones. Philosopher Charles Taylor says, it shows in our very deportment, the way we walk and move and gesture and speak is shaped from our earliest moments by our awareness that we appear before others, that we stand in public space, and this space is potentially one of respect or contempt, pride or shame. And I remember that game maybe better than any other lesson of my teenage education, because it was like someone had put a spotlight on something that I already knew. The emotions I was trying to act felt real. You know, in the first round, I got a high status card, and the swelling power of it, my word, woo! That's the good stuff. And when I picked the low card for the round 2, the like looming, ominous humiliation in my body, that time around, I reacted to the high card people with a queasy mix of like obsequiousness and hatred. And there were sticky traces everywhere in that room. Every interaction between people who thought themselves above or below someone else felt a bit ick. There was no real connection possible. And it's really tricky, actually, as a writer. One of the things I'm doing when I'm speaking or writing is subtly signaling my status to you. Like, I put on my silver shoes. I have my own personal disco ball. And I like my silver shoes. I like them for myself. But also a bit of me like, they're cool. Maybe they'll think I'm cool. I am dropping intellectual quotes so that you think I'm smart. Sometimes from books I haven't actually read. And it's because I know you are much less likely to listen to me if you think I am lower status than you are. And this is like a formation problem for me. It's a formation problem for anyone trying to speak in public, maybe for all of us in these days. Psychologist Abraham Tesser developed a theory around this, and he called it the self-evaluation maintenance model. And he argued that our sense of self or our self-esteem is largely dependent on our interactions with others, and that on any human interaction we are driven by a desire to maintain or improve our view of our own value. And we spend a lot of time needing other people, even if only subconsciously. A lot of you are ministers or pastors or chaplains, and there'll be slightly different dynamics for you maybe because you have been trained in a different way to observe a group and maybe not think, who's the highest status person here that I can go hang out with, but who's on the edges? Like, who needs a gaze? Who can I go and help. But even that helping in its unhealthy forms can become a form of needing, right? It can become a form of bolstering our sense of self. Because when we really turn our attention to the other, eye to eye, equal to equal, and are, as the piece says, fully emotionally present, they fill our whole gaze, and something extraordinary, something that feels like a blessing, can happen. And it is incredibly unusual. It's why the piece is so compelling, because we can all probably think of times where we've met that or something like that, and it's like this sweet memory. The opposite is so many networking parties, right? Where we go in and people looking over our shoulder to see if the next interesting person's coming on, or I might feel myself itching to look over their shoulder because they're saying something that I've stopped listening to because my mind is too busy and I'm not fully present to them, and therefore they have become boring. They aren't actually boring. No human being is. But my inattention makes them so. But on my best days, which are rare, when I can remember where my identity is actually rooted, I can go in, this is one of my favorite things to do, I can go into networking events with this very impish, mischievous spirit and play with all those games. Like someone asked me what I do, and I can try and triangulate what is the thing I can say that's going to make them most concerned about the status differential between and I won't give specifics, but it's different in every group. Particularly with intellectuals, I love this. I'm like, I want to talk about Love is Blind. And I say it as if like it's of the same value as Kant. And then I do like optical lock, just to hold their gaze. And they're looking over my shoulder and I'm like, how long can you stay talking to me? Because it feels important not to let myself be too formed by the rules of that game. To remind myself, I don't believe in that game. And I do not have to play it. Because I know that some people, like the extreme version of this, is allowing ourselves to feel that our whole lives have been defined by the lack of others' esteem and become embittered, like Iago, by a sense of, do you see that, Iago? Do you think I'm smart now? That's from Shakespeare. By a sense of being overlooked. Even when they experience apparent success, you will probably know someone who in theory has won all the status games and is still like a hungry ghost. In the periods where I have in theory some impressive things to show off and show and tell, like societal show and tell, like, look at me, I've got, I wrote an article or whatever the equivalent is in your world. It is delicious. The high status card, when you draw it, is delicious. Initially. And my ego unfurls and purrs like a happy cat. But it doesn't last that high. My own sense of satisfaction in a job well done does linger, but the acclaim, it leaves me not content, but wired like a child after a birthday party, heading for a crash and then craving more. And I'm increasingly convinced that whether we are winners or losers in the status game, and almost all of us, if we live long enough, will be both. We are all being played. Status differentials are distancing. They make it really difficult to meet people as they really are, to see them in that beautiful moment of happy self-surrender, to experience what Hartmut Rosa calls resonance, and Martin Buber calls I-thou moments, and I, in my slightly budget way, just call connection. And that is what we really crave, how we really flourish, what we are really looking for. So what can we do? You will have your own answers to this, and I'd be really interested. I don't know who's in the room today. I know a lot of you are formed by the Christian tradition, but many of you won't be, and I'd love to know where you go looking for this. For me, as someone so easily caught up in these dynamics, I want to get the actual claims of my actual faith into my bones and into my blood. To marinate in them, declare them, sing them, tattoo them on my body. I have not done that yet because, as we have discussed, I'm not very cool, but I might one day. As a sort of protective spell to the wider story about where to ground my sense of self. Because my faith calls bull. Did you notice? I bleeped it out because I'm with Americans. Faith calls bull on all this nonsense. Its central story is a figure who met everyone, from the lowest outcast to kings and rulers, and looked them in the eye. He looked up or down on nobody. The early church was radically egalitarian, made up again of people the wider culture despised, and though they cringed in deference to. And in that community, again, I'm sure imperfectly, but aspirationally and sometimes in reality, none of that mattered. The story logic of my faith paints humans as made to be in communion, not competition with each other. It affirms my particularity and locates it in a web of relationships. It makes it possible some days for me to believe myself seen and known, gazed upon lovingly. It claims I am complete already, my self-evaluation secure, and declared by an entirely just and kind external arbiter who just wants to hang out with me. It invites me to be something, invites me to be part of something that I don't need to construct or strive or perform for. My faith has helped me both become aware of and sometimes even able to extricate myself from status anxiety and status games. I'm trying to take seriously that every human being is made in the image of God, unutterably precious and entirely equal before him. And this is, in fact, powerful medicine. Atheist philosopher Alan de Botton has written an amazing book on this topic called Status Anxiety that I wholeheartedly commend to you. And Christianity is one of his 3 antidotes to status anxiety, even though he does not share its views. He acknowledges that this audacious claim can act as an antidote. Because it claims that not only are status games empty and pointless shadow posturing, but that if any hierarchy exists, it is upside down. Theological anthropology, if we let it, can undercut our desire to be special, which is really a desire to be better than. When Dash, in The Incredibles, is told by his mother, "Everyone is special, Dash," and he replies, which is another way of saying no one is, he's saying something profound. We've been taught to value ourselves almost entirely in comparison. And the idea of the imago Dei and equality in the love of God is an invitation to resist that. It says it is possible to be entirely loved and entirely unremarkable in being so. I think there's a next session called Being an Average Joe in the Kingdom of God. I love it. Some days I love it. Some days, when I sit with this thought, my ego feels abraded because a big part of me wants to be special, as in better than. But when I can notice that and have some compassion on it and bring it to the feet of Jesus, that eventually gives way to relief and a deep sense of connectedness. Rowan Williams expresses more eloquently, as usual, than me, what I feel. He says his faith is a way out of the fearful and cautious negotiation of my identity, because God alone is beyond the precarious exchanges of creatures who need affirmation. With God alone, I am dealing with what does not need to construct or negotiate an identity, what is free to be itself without the process of struggle. The Message translation of Matthew 5:5, "Blessed are the meek," is, you're blessed when you're content with just who you are. No more, no less. that's the moment you find yourself proud owners of everything that cannot be bought. When I read the Substack piece about charismatic people, the root of the word charisma was so clear to me. And many of you have more theological education than I, so you will know that the root of the word charisma is the Greek word for gift or grace. Truly charismatic people are a gift to others because they know what they have received. If we knew ourselves in the light of grace, really knew it, how would we show up in the world? What kind of traces would we leave on other people? I'm trying to live towards a God who never needed me, never needed anything from me, who was loved before the universe began, but wants me, welcomes me, delights in my presence. And I am trying to practice haltingly loving others as I have been loved, as it invites us in 1 John 4. And I have been loved freely. And so I so want to learn to love freely. Live freely, listen freely, give people my attention freely. But it's important that we remember that charisma means gift, because I don't want you to go away thinking you need to strive to change into someone you're not. I'm aware that the days I manage to move through the world like this, and they are few, but they are real and they are so fun, are partly due to my unusually healthy childhood. The wounds of not having received a human gaze can sometimes get in the way of us knowing that we are gazed on and called beloved, and we may need some specialist help with that. But for today, I don't want you to hear that you have to change your whole personality or become super extroverted, because unfortunately, extroversion is not a spiritual gift, I am told. We do not have to pretend that we are not wounded, that we never get anxious, that we are not sometimes intimidated by people or dismissive of people or want to get something from people. Most days, those are all me. But what I'm finding is that becoming more aware of these tendencies, calling bull on them, and then seeking to take them and root them back into the gift of grace really helps me unclench. When I can turn my attention again and again on the source of stability and healing and safety and unconditional love that I find in Jesus, it changes me. And so I hope that if all of us, and you're probably really far ahead of me on this, if we can all continue to turn our attention toward what we need to stabilize our sense of self, we will find help in becoming, in our own particular, sometimes quiet, more truly, beautifully charismatic people. Thank you very much.